Former President Trump will be back in court this morning for day 6 of his New York hush money trial. But before testimonies continue, there will be a hearing on whether the former president violated his gag order. Brooke Singman is here with more. Hi, Brooke.
Hey, Carly. Yeah, trial resumes this morning at 9:30 Eastern when the judge will hear arguments from prosecutors who say former President Trump violated his gag order. Now, the gag order prohibits Trump from talking about witnesses and jurors involved in the hush money case, but the DA's office says Trump violated the gag order 10 times by posting to social media about people connected to the case. Now, the prosecution is asking the court to not only fine the former president $1,000 per violation, but also hold him in contempt of court. Trump has repeatedly called for the gag order to be dropped, saying it's unfair for people to attack him without allowing him to respond. And Trump's attorney says this all boils down to the election. Listen.
The Democrats claim that Trump is a threat to democracy. The real threat to democracy is the willingness to abuse the power of your office to influence what should otherwise be a free and fair election. And that's exactly what's going on downtown in the courtroom. I mean, look at just this week. You've got a hearing in the civil case about essentially nothing. You've got a criminal trial starting, and later this week there'll be a Supreme Court argument, all in cases that were made up specifically for the purpose of influencing the outcome of an election.
If the gag order hearing is not finished by 11, it will be continued at a later date. Jurors will not be brought in until after that hearing. Then the prosecution's first witness, David Pecker, will continue his testimony after taking the stand for less than 30 minutes yesterday. So Pecker is the former publisher of the National Enquirer and testified about using so-called checkbook journalism to pay for stories that boosted former President Trump ahead of the 2016 election. Now, he's expected to tell the jury about conversations he allegedly had with Trump about hush money payments that were allegedly made to cover up negative stories about him. The trial wrapped up earlier than expected on Monday after a juror had an emergency dentist appointment. Court is expected to wrap up at 2 p.m. today. Carly.
All right, Brooke Simon live for us. Brooke, thank you so much for keeping it all straight for us. We appreciate it, as always.
Anti-Israel protests sweeping college campuses across our country, including at Yale University, where police say they arrested 47 people just yesterday. Jeremy Hunt is a former Army captain who attended Yale University. He's with me on campus right now. Jeremy, great to have you as always. And as someone who walked these campus buildings, who walked these campus walkways, whose Yale Law School campus, no joke, is about 20 yards to my right.
That's right.
What's your reaction to what you're seeing?
Yeah, well, I first just want to say, look, I mean, there are many people that might be watching what's going on and thinking, you know, this is just normal kind of campus craziness. Yeah, this is something that we should all just kind of expect. College students do crazy things. That is not what we're seeing here. What we're seeing here is far, far worse than that. And one thing that I learned being in classrooms with these students for 3 years is that they genuinely believe the nonsense that you've heard at these protests. I mean, they truly believe that up is down and down is up. They honestly believe that when you look at the atrocities and the mass rape and murder that happened on October 7th, that it was somehow justified because they think that Israel is a so-called apartheid state. I mean, so what's very concerning is that these folks are going to be using their Ivy League degrees to become leaders in academia, business, politics, and the rest of us, we need to do everything we can to make sure they never get anywhere close to power, because we know that they have such a distorted view of justice. And it's one of the reasons why even at Veterans on Duty, we're always about having veteran leaders, promoting folks who care about our Constitution, that care about their country, making sure those folks have a shot in running for office, because we don't want people at places like Yale actually coming into major institutions and leading our country. It is dangerous. You know, what's funny is when I first got here, I thought that I was going to build bridges and find common ground. There is no common ground to be found with people who think that our Jewish brothers and sisters deserve what happened on October 7th. The only way forward is to make sure we defeat them and that these folks have no chance of leading our country in the future.
Okay, but how? How do you want to see the Yale University leadership respond to what they saw yesterday and what potentially they could see today in the coming days?
Have a backbone. Arrest them. If you are going to get on campus and spout out openly, blatantly anti-Semitic remarks, if you're going to be here saying horrible things about people who, by the way, are classmates. That's the crazy thing about Yale is that you'll sit in a classroom with someone right next to them, and the next day they're protesting you. I mean, this should not be. This is not a hard leadership test. This is not one of those tough decisions, and you got to kind of figure out how to weigh. There's one solution. That is, make sure that these folks are no longer enrolled at the school if they're going to say horrible things about Jewish people. And other thing to remember, too, is that what's ironic about this whole thing is that they really cared about peace in the Middle East and peace for the Palestinian people. They would be out here protesting Hamas, not Israel. I mean, there is one way to peace in the Middle East, and that is if Israel finishes this fight, that is if they defeat Hamas, free the hostages, and free the Palestinian civilians from the grips of Hamas and restore deterrence. I mean, that's one of the reasons why Vets on Duty, we supported the financial package to send financial aid over to our allies in the Middle East and Eastern Europe to make sure they have the resources they need to defeat those who want to defeat the United States.
What I can't wrap my head around, Jeremy, is schools like Yale, Columbia, they are the bastions of DEI. Think of all the money that went to DEI and is still going to DEI at these universities. Yet, for some reason, that does not apply to our Jewish brothers and sisters, but it does apply to Hamas terrorists. Help me understand that.
I mean, we are seeing the results of decades of these DEI programs. And what do we have? We have a spirit of hate that is clearly embedded in a lot of these students and what they believe about each other, what they believe about people who think differently from them, people who have different politics, people who are proud of their Jewish heritage, who are proud to stand with Israel. They hate those who think differently. And so if that is the result of DEI, we need to make sure DEI has no place in any institution in this country again.
I understand that you said the individuals believe what they're doing. They believe in these causes, despite how insane it seems to us. But if they believe, why are they all wearing masks? Because quite frankly, I don't see a lot of COVID floating around here.
That is one of the most perplexing things that I've tried to figure out for 3 years. Like, why are people still obsessed with these masks? I don't know. You're outside. I trust that we're okay here.
Right, but my question is, like, are they embarrassed? Even though they're proud of their belief, are they somehow embarrassed and they don't want the world to see?
Maybe for some of them, but I honestly think the far majority of them, what's really disturbing is that they are not here because of peer pressure. They aren't here because, they think this is just kind of a cool fad to be a part of and they want acceptance. They genuinely believe that what they are standing on is actually the right thing. And that's what's so disturbing is that they are totally bass-ackwards in the way they approach everything in our culture. And so, they wear the masks. A lot of times, they have their little theories floating around about why they do that. I won't get on that. Sure. But I'll just say it's not something that they're proud of what they believe, and they stand on it.
It has to be extremely difficult for you as a veteran to experience that. It's tough for just Americans to see what's going on and say, is this our country right now? Jeremy, thank you for fighting for our country. We appreciate you doing that. We appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you, Todd.
Carly, over to you.
Yeah, they are in full belief, and some of them are chanting, "We are Hamas." Todd, Jeremy, thank you so much. There are still no arrests made in the murder of 30-year-old Chicago police officer Luis Huesca. But the Chicago PD just released this video of the suspected killer, warning he's believed to be armed and dangerous. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson did not attend the press conference to update the public on the search for the cop killer, but he did make time to be part of the groundbreaking ceremony for the new airport terminal at Chicago's O'Hare Airport. And on top of that, Johnson is pushing a $1.25 billion migrant housing plan, despite already spending over $300 million. John Garrido is a retired Chicago police lieutenant, and he joins me now. John, good morning to you. We should note that it's Officer Huesca's birthday today. He would have been 31 years old had he not been murdered in what police are describing an apparent carjacking while driving home from work, still in his uniform. What went through your head when you heard about this?
You know, it's heartbreaking whenever we hear that we lose an officer. You know, we have a saying that the number one priority is for our officers to get home safely to their families at the end of their tour of duty. And now here in Chicago, this is the second time within a year that we've had an officer literally executed on their way home from work. You know, you kind of think when you're leaving the station, and not that it's a conscious thought, but you know, your day is done. Your end of your shift. You're done crime fighting for the day, and for this to happen is just heartbreaking.
So we now have surveillance video of a suspect. We don't know anything about him, but from your experience, what are the chances that somebody who murders a police officer is a first-time offender?
Oh, there's no doubt. I mean, it's almost as if they're seeing the uniform that the officer is wearing, and they're leveling up from robbery to murder. These criminals are they're predators. They're out there in the streets. You know, our carjackings in Chicago are through the roof. I know they'll tell you, well, you know, we're trending down. We're double at 1,300 carjackings last year. We're over double what we were before the pandemic. It's really getting out of hand.
And now you got to look at city leadership. As we said, Mayor Brandon Johnson, he didn't attend the press conference announcing Officer Huesca's death and talking about the details of what police know at that time. Instead, he released a statement, but yesterday he was all smiles at this airport groundbreaking at Chicago's O'Hare Airport. What are your thoughts on his leadership? You know,
it's disgraceful and a slap in the face to every Chicago police officer that he couldn't take the time out of his busy schedule to get out there to show respect for the officer, for a fallen officer. I don't ever remember a mayor missing the street press conference, and this is the press conference that usually takes place right away, within an hour or two after the investigation gets started. It was about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. There's absolutely nothing else that he could have been doing that was more important than being out there to show respect for the officer and their family and our fellow officers.
Without question. And on top of that, as you mentioned, Chicago crime is on the rise with over 1,600 cases of aggravated battery, 546 cases of criminal sexual assault, 131 murders, and over 2,500 robberies. John, what needs to change?
What we need to change is we need to take politics out of law enforcement. We need to let the officers get out there and do the job that they're hired to do, and these politicians need to back up these officers. I mean, just him missing that press conference, that sends a message to the officers that we're not the priority, and that's got to change. Right now, they're having a hard time even hiring officers. We're losing officers in droves. Almost 1,100 officers last year resigned or retired from the Chicago Police Department. And a lot of these are lateral transfers. They're not leaving law enforcement, but they're leaving Chicago police law enforcement.
Chicago's police superintendent Larry Snelling said Officer Huesca was a victim of the type of crime that he was working against to keep people in the city safe. This is an absolute tragedy, and he would have turned 31 years old today. My heart breaks for him, his mom, who is remembering the day that he was born, 2 days after he died. It's a horrific loss. John, thank you so much for joining us. Let's bring in Outkick host Tomi Lahren to talk more about this. Tomi, about this gag order. So Donald Trump is not allowed to talk about any of the witnesses, and that would include Michael Cohen, who is at this point a public figure and who is on a media tour bashing Donald Trump. How is that fair?
It's not fair, and he's also a known liar, Michael Cohen is. And so I think all of this, I mean, it's so comical. I know that we talked about how this is going to be such a circus, and New Yorkers are getting so tired of the circus involved in this. Imagine how President Trump feels about this. He would much rather be on the campaign trail. He'd much rather be in need-to-win states talking to average Americans about how he wants to make this country great again. He would much rather be doing all of that and sharing his vision for restoring America. But unfortunately, because of these endless indictments, witch hunts, and trials, he is stuck in a courtroom in New York City where the city is no friend to him, unfortunately. And, you know, again, the fact that Donald Trump continues to go on Truth Social and to speak his mind, I think shows just how badly Donald Trump wants to control this narrative, but also speak directly to his supporters, because there's so much misinformation, so many lies being told about him. He absolutely deserves the ability, and he has the duty, in my opinion, to respond so that the American voter knows what's really going on. To keep him silenced is so un-American, it's so unfair, but I wouldn't expect anything less at this point.
Yeah, and, you know, he could be held in contempt, which could hold jail time for him, or a massive violation. Nobody wants that to happen, but also at the same time, imagine what that imagery would do for his political campaign. So also, Tommy, somewhat of a sidebar to this, but interesting nonetheless, business owners in downtown Manhattan are now speaking out against this circus, this court hearing. And you'd think that because it is bringing some spectators that it would be good for business there, but it's not, because all the streets are blocked off around the courthouse so nobody could get into their stores. So the Daily Mail has a headline saying New York is sick of the circus. New York City and Middle America don't really agree on much, but it's looking like they're starting to agree on this.
Well, again, you know, I spend a lot of time in New York City, so I think the least circus element is probably the Trump trial. Yeah. There's a lot of, you know, bigger issues and probably more important issues that are destroying businesses and making it difficult for average people to get around and to enjoy their lives and their businesses. But I'll also say this, because I feel for these New Yorkers that are being deprioritized by the DA and by the court system, when the court system and the DA, they could actually be spending their time and the resources and the tax dollars to go after actual thugs, felons, and degenerates that are making it hard to live in New York City. But instead, they're going after a former president because the Trump derangement syndrome is so strong, they just can't get over that hill. But yes, these businesses have every right to be upset. They should be more upset, however, that this is being prioritized over keeping their city safe, clean, and maybe in some sort of functioning reality. Unfortunately, New York City is far from that these days.
Yeah, that's a great point. Also, Tommy, we want to ask you about this. Could happen today. TikTok, of course, facing a potential ban as part of the foreign aid bills that passed the House over the weekend. Now it's heading over to the Senate, and that could pass the Senate as early as today. President Biden has said that he would sign this TikTok ban, potential ban, if it doesn't divest from China, into law. At the same time, man, does he want that youth vote? So what's going to happen here?
Well, I tell you this, I think it's going to be very difficult for President Biden to sign something like this, given that he himself is on TikTok, or at least his handlers are, and there's a slew of other Democrats that also utilize TikTok to connect with young voters. But I will say this, I'm no fan of TikTok. I'm not on TikTok. I never will be on TikTok. And I hope that parents get their children off TikTok, because it is digital fentanyl. However, I will tell you, Carly, it makes me very nervous when the government forces a sale of a company, or when the government moves to ban a social media platform. I see this as a very slippery slope. I wish that we could trust the government to stop at a Chinese communist-tied platform, but unfortunately, I don't trust the government to do that, and I'm very concerned that this precedent will be set with a TikTok ban, and then that's only a short jump to, oh, Elon Musk is threatening democracy. Yeah. He must sell X. I mean, This is a real slippery slope we're headed into, so I'm very cautious about this.
Interesting perspectives from you, Tommy, as always. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The president of Columbia University now facing bipartisan calls to resign over her handling of anti-Semitic protests on campus. Democrat Senator John Fetterman saying, quote, "These protests are anti-Semitic, unconscionable, and dangerous." Add some tiki torches, and it's Charlottesville for these Jewish students. To Columbia President Manoush Shafik, do your job or resign so Columbia can find someone who will. Congresswoman Claudia Tenney is one of 10 New York Republican lawmakers that signed a letter calling for Shafik to step down, and she joins me now. Congresswoman, great to be with you. Despite Shafik's words, let's face it, these protests are escalating. So why do you
and many Democratic lawmakers as well, feel that Shafik has reached the point of no return.
Well, obviously, she's not able to contain these people, Todd. It's really tragic for these students. It's unsafe, and it violates Title VI of the Education Act, which requires a safe environment for learning, and which could be contingent on them continuing to receive federal funds. Columbia, now you're in, I believe you're in Yale. I can't see the camera, but I believe you're at Yale. We had this all
Yale.
started with Cornell University Cornell University professor saying that it was exhilarating and exciting after the horrific, brutal attacks on Hamas with the raping of children, burning children alive and families. And I immediately called for the expulsion of this professor. I wrote to the Cornell University president, and then you've seen what's transpired since then. Obviously the Education Committee under Virginia Fox and the great work by Elise Stefanik. This letter was led by Elise Stefanik, who is the conference chair of the Republican Party. I'm glad to see there's some Democrats joining in. Unfortunately, the words of my colleague Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are disturbing. These are dangerous protests, and they put Jewish students at risk. And it's particularly bad when you consider that we started the Passover season yesterday, and this is a holy time for Jewish people. And I almost think it's deliberate. At this point, if this president can't maintain the peace, she has to be eliminated, or she has to be fired. And, these students have to be expelled. These faculty have to be fired. And we have to consider whether or not this board can take control of what's happening. And I give credit also to Mayor Adams for at least getting the police in there, the NYPD. But you're seeing a situation that is escalating because of money that is coming to these people. It is my firm belief these are not these are not grassroots. They're funded by outside groups, right, likely through 501c3s, through Hamas.
There's definitely some funding here. And from the president of Colombia to the president of the United States, here's Joe Biden's take on the protests that we've seen. Listen.
Do you condemn the anti-Semitic protests on college campuses?
I condemn the anti-Semitic protests. That's why I've set up a program to deal with that. I also condemn those who don't understand what's going on with the Palestinians.
Should the Columbia University president resign?
I didn't know that. I'll have to find out
should she
more.
resign?
You have many people calling this Joe Biden's Charlottesville moment. I listen to an answer like that, and to me, Congresswoman, it's clear why there's no sort of sense of right and wrong in this country when it comes to this issue, because the president of the United States is wishy-washy on it. Your thoughts?
Look, the president is not telling the truth. He is worried about getting reelected. This ceasefire, anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic movement is largely because of one district in Michigan, which could cost him the entire election. It's pure politics. It's diabolical that this president can't stand up and support Israel, support our Jewish students, and bring clarity to this issue. And as you said, Todd, correctly, this is a moral clarity moment for Joe Biden, and he has failed. He has failed on this issue. He has failed to support students under siege by a terrorist enemy. And it's just sad for our country, but it's also dangerous. As you can see, all of these students and their families, many are suffering through this terrible period. And we have to stand behind our Jewish friends and also against this anti-Semitism, something the Biden administration is not doing.
Yeah, let's face it, if you have the word president in your title, you should be unequivocal when it comes to this issue. Yet, when you hear the president of Colombia and the president of the United States, they are not. And that's the reason I think we're in the situation we're in. Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, thank you for your moral clarity on this issue. We appreciate it.
In the soft embrace of morning light, rocky and rugged, hopefully sight, a whisper of promise, a sense so sweet, reviving energy with every heartbeat. Oh yeah, stumbling down the stairs with grace. Favorite mug and cherished embrace. Each sip, a dance of enchantment. Caffeine's elixir, a daily enchantment. Coffee in the morning, my lifeline. Guiding through life's chaotic design. Finding every sip of morning zest. In that brew, I find my best. The morning sun, a gentle caress, bathing the world in warmth no less. A symphony of flavors in every pore, awakening senses, a ritual to adore. The kitchen hums a quiet tune as dreams unfold not too soon. Pouring the elixir, stories take flight. In the world of coffee, my spirit alights. A mug cradled, a vessel of tales. Each sip, a dialogue as morning unveils. Bitterness, a new world of tales. As the day unfolds, a caffeinated tale in morning symphony, where moments prevail. Coffee, my companion in the sunrise quest. In the ritual of morning, my eternal zest. The world awakens, a canvas so bright. In the palette of dawn, a captivating sight. A dance of flavors, a morning trance. In the world of coffee, life's sweet romance.